just the feeling after the game. I remember looking up around Suncorp, and it was generally 15, 20 minutes after the game had finished. No one had left. The Queensland public for so long were yearning for the Reds to do well and to win that. You go from Super Rugby, which is a type of way to play the game, and you go to Europe and they play the game differently, and you're just pulling all the different ways to play. And from a coaching perspective, my knowledge I felt went from there to kind of there, and just a great way and get an understanding that there's different ways to play the game. 2018, beating England for the first time in a decade, that was unbelievable atmosphere. We went out that night. We went back as a coaching group and a team, and we drank a lot, and then people were having us up on our shoulders.
Welcome back to the show, guys. Good to have you back here in Tokyo. And of course, welcome to Manny Taylor. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Tom.
How are we feeling today, guys? Fed, watered?
Yes, very much so.
Pumped. Excited.
Awesome. Excellent. Well, as we kick off everything else, same way as always, let's find out how you guys know Mr. Manny Taylor we've got here.
Tatsy. Known him for a while, actually. He's a good man. I first met him in 2010 at the Reds. He was our defence coach there. Yeah, good man on the field, good man off the field, and just an all-round good bloke.
Thanks, Willie.
It's nice, isn't it? We just met over some gyoza, so
First
they
time
feel
we
like
met.
brothers. Yeah,
Best way to meet in Japan, right?
that's right.
Awesome.
Coached against Manny at various clubs. I think the first one was Brumbies when I was at the Reds, and then Glasgow, Toulon,
Yep.
and then Scotland, Australia. So didn't know each other personally, but probably knew a lot of friends, did we?
Yeah.
People, we had mutual friends as you do with rugby, but yeah, great to catch up today actually.
Awesome. All right, well, let's start then with the Reds, because you guys have both been there. What year did you actually join up with the Reds?
Yeah, so I was in the Reds Academy for a number of years, but started at the Reds in 2010, and I was there from 10, 11 and 12, so it was a really enjoyable time, Willie, because I think the previous decade, probably the Reds hadn't performed at a high level really, and then we managed in our first year I think we went from 13th to 5th, first year 10, and then into 11 we went to 5th to win it. So yeah, it was a lovely time, really enjoyable rugby, great guys to coach. Ewan McKenzie was the head coach at the time, who was an exceptional head coach, and Super Rugby back then was really strong. The Australian teams were strong, New Zealand teams were certainly very strong, as well as the South African team. So to win that was really enjoyable, and the journey was really enjoyable as well. So I think the style of rugby was good as well. So
A lot of talent though too around
Yeah.
that period. There's lots of players that went on to play for the Wallabies for a long time. Like, I'd probably say the most successful period Queensland had in that 3-4 year period. Yeah.
yeah, no, it was. We had lots of good players. I mean, Will and Quade was exceptional those years. We had Digby Ioane, who was really good. Scott Higginbotham, who was sensational. Radiki Samu. We had lots of really great players, and even the depth, like people even like say Luke Morahan, who was a good player. He couldn't always make the team, but when he did play, he played well. And it was a great bunch of guys, and guys who went on who did a lot for Australia as well. So we had good tussles against the Brumbies, the Waratahs, and then the new teams, even the Force and the Rebels at that stage. So it was an exciting couple of years, really, really good to be part of.
Yeah, I remember everyone talks about the attack that we used to have and the way we played, but I remember defence was genuinely our big focus. I remember Monday you'd come out with a book like that, thick about the opposition we're about to play, all their set plays, what their tendency was, who kicks off left foot, right foot. But the thing about that was we always felt so prepared getting into the game on the weekend, and that's something that I always look back on and really appreciate that you brought to our squad for sure.
Oh, thanks, Willie. Yeah, I mean, it was a dream come true to get the opportunity to, coach the Reds, because it was a team that I'd supported as a kid, and as the number of other teams which I've coached, it's amazing that, I supported Scotland because my parents were Scottish. I supported Australia because I grew up in Australia, and I'm lucky that I've coached 3 teams I support as a kid. It's quite amazing, and I feel quite blessed in that regard. But I think it's always really important as a defence coach that you get a balance between being prepared but also not giving too much. So you might concentrate on 2 or 3 things, and might be a couple of oppositions. I'm sure Gits was maybe heads on a plate for the
definitely
Brumbies
was.
a couple of times, whether or not we did a good enough job on occasions, because I remember him knocking us off up there with at Suncorp a couple of times. But no, listen, it was great to be part of that Reds team. So
You're the catalyst to not so much hide, but move Quade around, like out of the front line. And then other teams obviously saw that strategy. We did it in the Wallabies, right?
Yeah.
I defend at the front of the line out just to save a bit of energy. Like, what was your thought around that?
yeah, so Quade, as we know, particularly back then, he probably wasn't as physically big. He's actually developed physically a lot over the last couple of years. But like you said, I think 10's got a lot of traffic. We had a guy, John O'Lance, you know very well, who was an exceptionally good tackler, and he really enjoyed that part of the game.
Yeah, like his old man.
Yeah, like his old man from Canberra Raiders, as you know. And listen, it just worked really well because, you know, we could swap Quade to the back. Jono would come in, who loved tackling and was pretty good at it. Quade, who was probably a better attacker, and teams started kicking the ball. He could use his footwork from the back. So it kind of worked really well. I mean, teams try to do different things, like putting high balls on them a bit more and trying to like blast them and stuff like that. But listen, I think what we did was, we engineered something which gave us strengths both sides of the ball with using the personnel that we had. So that was good. It worked well.
We had some good competitive sessions too around that time. I remember that team being so competitive, and sometimes it spilled over with the staff. I remember you and me had a run in.
Yeah,
I think we had a defensive drill where the starting team was defending and you were running the attack so that we could practice.
Yeah.
And I think a couple of times they would start earlier before we were set.
Yeah.
And then I kept saying, Tatsy, make him wait, make him fucking wait.
We could blow up.
And then you go, listen here, mate, just worry about your fucking job. And then I think I come back to you, I was like, fuck off, mate, just do your job. And I remember you said to me, listen here, I'm not your fucking mate, all right? And then I went into my shell pretty quick.
No, I think it was funny because I posted a picture of me and you on Instagram the other day, and Chibba Hansen texted me back, said, one of the best blow-ups I've ever seen or something like that, and had a laugh. But, listen, I think, like as you said, we're all pretty competitive, and as we've just said, I mean, I'm 50 now. Back then I was early 30s, but you're a little bit more roused up when you're young at that age. But no, we became good mates, didn't we? And,
yeah, for sure.
We had that competitive element in us, and I think that was part of the reasons why we did well with the Reds too. I think we tried to make the training as competitive as we could, and bring a bit of edge to training, and that certainly helped us progress as a team, I think.
Do you think that's something that's potentially lost, like over the course of your coaching career and different teams you've coached, where people aren't as hard on each other as they probably should be in terms of wanting to get the best out of each other and holding people accountable?
Yeah, I think we've had good conversations around that. I think, as you suggested, probably when you guys were young players, and older players would probably, tear strips of you if things weren't right, and probably society in general, at work, people, that would happen at work. But I think whether just the way things are with coaching, that less and less of that happens. I think there's a time and a place for it, and you got to be probably strategic in how you do it and when you do it. But I agree, there's probably less of it now. I don't know whether it's a good or a bad thing, but it's just the way kind of coaches are and people are in society now, isn't it? You can't really tear strips of people like you probably could without people complaining and being a bit sensitive about it.
What was it like, sort of having a couple of mavericks, guys like Quade and Tigby and stuff in that team? How do you sort of nourish that talent without, I guess, letting them have too much of a free rein?
Yeah, listen, I mean, in the Reds as well as Scotland, like I actually compared Quade and Finn Russell. I always thought they were very similar sort of players. I think you've got structures within the team, but those type of players, you allow them to kind of see things or do things that maybe some other players can't see or do, and you let them go. Probably like both of these guys here. You have structures, but those type of players will probably see things that other players don't. So again, I was an assistant coach both of those teams, so I didn't have overall control of the team, but both Ewan McKenzie and Gregor Townsend just allow those guys to kind of operate in their own to a certain degree.
I had an interesting conversation with Ewan McKenzie, myself and James Hall. So he sat both of us down, I think it was 2010 or 11, and he said, look, we need Quade playing to the best of his ability if we're going to win the competition or play well or perform well. So he said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to allow him to have a little bit of leniency on the field and off the field. Because then if we make him feel like he's sort of in charge or, it's his team, which essentially it was. But if we can do that and it allows him to play his best football, then I'm happy with that.
Yeah.
So it's interesting ideas around how you can look after those maverick type of players to be able to get the best out of them for the team.
A little bit like Dennis Rodman.
Yes.
Yeah, you got those 3 days away in Vegas. I mean, I'm not saying that you do that for Quade, but
He wouldn't come back.
But I mean, that's like Phil Jackson or good coaches. They kind of understand what certain people can bring and what will bring out the best in them. So I think with instinctive players, the more structure that everyone else is in, the more creativity and instinctively they can play because they know where everyone's going to be. So you can play a little bit more eyes up. Even Digby, back in those days, you and Digby had an unreal connection.
Funny thing about Digby is he prepared as well as I've ever seen anyone prepare as far as physically, but then also mentally. He'd study all the plays, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, but then he'd get to Saturday and call Quade and be like, bro, what am I supposed to be for this play? And then he'd get on the field and be like, Quade would just be like, just stay on the inside, stay on the inside. But we were lucky with him. He was just naturally, instinctively, he understood the game. So he understood time and space, where he was supposed to be. You know, he's similar to like a Marika from an athletic perspective, where they've got big engines. They get around the field. They do a lot of work.
Yep.
But Digby's probably a little bit different in that his understanding and I think anticipation of the game was probably on a high level, I'd say.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
We were lucky to have a player like him. He's one of the best players I played with.
He would sometimes get you in trouble as a ball player though, because he always wants the ball. And be going, inside. Ass man, pass it inside. You look inside and there's 3 people.
Yeah.
Like he just wanted the ball, like loved to get involved.
Quade tells a story. He'd run a decoy line, we'd score at the back of it or something, and he'd be like, bro, next time look for me, I was through. And Quade'd be watching the replay on the big screen. He goes, bro, there's 3 people in front of me. He goes, it doesn't matter, give it to me.
I'll beat them, yeah.
And he probably would too.
Yeah. He's such a powerful athlete, wasn't he?
Oh.
Just broke tackles and, yeah, it was hard man to stop. And then, like you said, you had Higgins in there who, you know, he was part Fijian. Probably a lot of people wouldn't know that, but he had that athletic ability to be able to break tackles and, you know, turn up. He was very quick too, wasn't he?
He doesn't get as much credit as he deserves. He was a special player.
Yeah,
He's got a lot of tries. Was he top try scorer in Queensland?
I think he'd be up there. Yeah. I think he scored the most tries as a forward.
As a forward in Super Rugby, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
He was a special player.
And then you had Radicki in there as well. He was another big
He made
guy. And,
he made the rugby ball look like a tennis ball.
yeah. Did you play with him as well?
Yeah, so the year we won it, the Brumbies,
Yep.
he was a big part of that, where he could just hold it one hand, play with a lot of freedom, create like so much space for everyone else.
Yeah.
2011, that obviously championship year, you guys must have had a pretty good party to round out the season.
Well, more than that, I know you're a real big believer in balance.
Yeah.
As far as making sure you enjoy yourselves off the field
Yeah.
as well. I mean, tell us a little bit about that, because you're one of the great men when it comes to understanding that balance.
Yeah, listen, I think we certainly, after that final, we went down to the local watering hole and we certainly enjoyed ourselves till late in the night. I think I vanished probably about 3 or 4 in the morning, and I know you guys, I think, kicked on somewhere else, and we actually had a function with all our supporters, I think, the next day. And I think most of the boys had, wherever you guys had ended up, and had just basically come to Ballymore, and I think the manager got us in the room and he was just trying to sober up all the boys. And unfortunately, I think he got a few things thrown at him, and there was all sorts of shenanigans going on, but we managed to show a pretty good face with the public, and I think there was a few more days of partying at that.
Oh, man.
I think Ewan McKenzie was pretty strict on assistant coaches partying, so I managed to sneak off and still have a few beers with the boys. And I remember turning up to work a couple of days later, he goes, "Oh, were you drinking with the boys?" I said, no, but I think they were at the other end of the bar or something like that, though. So, which was pretty good, but there was certainly a lot of celebration. I think the one thing that stayed with me in regards to winning that competition was just the feeling after the game. I remember looking up around Suncorp, and it was generally 15, 20 minutes after the game had finished, and there was no one had left. I think everyone, the Queensland public for so long were yearning for the Reds to do well and to win that after a period of not doing very well. People just wanting to stay, soak it up. And I think out of any probably rugby memory, including international, it's probably my happiest memory, just the feeling of that winning that. So it was sensational.
Yeah, the crowds were building nicely, I remember, throughout the year. You started for 20,000, 30, and I think it ended up 50. Is it hold 50, Suncorp?
Yeah, so we sold it out for the semi and the final.
Yeah.
Because we had them both at home.
You look at the crowds now, that's That's pretty special.
Just on that balance you're talking about. So you and Mackenzie didn't like these coaches drinking with the players?
Oh, I think Ewan's a very smart guy and a very astute coach. I think what he was always worried about was an assistant coach probably getting a little bit too loose in front of the players and then maybe not being able to, then the players not having the respect for him. I mean, I ended up having a few beers with you guys over the years, and I know I enjoyed myself. Hopefully I didn't get too...
the reason I'll bring it up, I remember we were in Durban. We just played the Sharks. It was 2010.
Yeah.
And around that time, they would have the braais outside the stadium in the car park as you go in. And then so after the game, they had the post-match function at this... they'd set it up and it ended up being a nightclub after as well. So
that's right.
we all stayed there. And then the Ewan goes, all right, everyone else on the bus. Who wants to go home? On the bus. Everybody else, you can stay and have a few drinks. And so us as all players are there having a few drinks. And then we walk towards the bar and we see you. We see you. And then I remember like yesterday, you go, shh, you didn't see me, I didn't see you.
Yeah. Like me and Jimmy Mackay, me and Jimmy have a few laughs because often we might be in Wellington, for instance, and Link would say, "Oh, come on, let's go have a coffee. We need to be up early or whatever the next day." We'd go, "Yeah, okay, Link," and we'd go have a few coffees, and we'd go to bed. And me and Jimmy would go, "I want to go down for a beer," and so we'd come back down and go and have a few more beers, and then Link wouldn't be wiser in the morning for it. But listen, you got to have a balance. I think it's important that you have a balance within anything, isn't it? Like you want the boys to enjoy themselves, and as we've suggested, I think with social media and everything now, and fortunately you probably can't do some of the things that you used to be able to do, but it's just the way society is now.
I remember that year, like in Gits, I know you're a big believer in balance as well. Like whether it's right or wrong, we probably drank or like got on the beers every week, midweek. But I think because we had the balance right between if we do that, we turn up ready to work and ready to play.
Yeah, that's right.
We actually just enjoyed ourselves not only as footy players but as people. I think getting that balance right is so crucial. And I understand that sport it's professional, it's your job, but you still got to make sure that you have that human element to it where you can have things where you switch off and do things that you switch off. And for some people, it's having a few beers. And I thought that particular season we had the balance really, really sort of down pat nicely.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you guys suggested, I think, on your tours of the Northern Hemisphere, like the Wallabies, and talking to Slips just recently about it, like, was it Tuesday night, your big night, or Wednesday night? Or
Tuesday
after, because you had Wednesday off, didn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was just a regular, wherever you were, whether it was Dublin, whether it was Cardiff, you go out on that Tuesday and just go for it, whereas that probably doesn't happen as much anymore. But I think with a lot of professional teams now, which I've been involved in, so I say for Scotland, like we might look at a 3-week period where we're overseas and go, okay, well, let's talk to the leaders, like you're going to have a big drink on this day and that day, but let's try and not... It wouldn't be every weekend, so it's probably, rather than going every week now, it's probably strategic, like you do it here, and boys, if you win 2 in a row, let's have a drink here if you don't. So you got that motivational factor in there, hopefully a little bit as well. So,
all right, well, let's head on to the next part of your career, Manny, which with the Reds for a few years, obviously, and then you headed north to Scotland.
Yeah, so I had a connection with Scotland. My parents are Scottish, and I'd gone over and played professionally in Scotland 2000, 2004. I played 2 years with Edinburgh Rugby and 2 years with the Borders, which is now unfortunately defunct. So I had I played with Gregor Townsend in the Borders, so I had a good relationship with him. And 2011, after the World Cup in New Zealand, Scotland were after a new defence coach. I'd just been with the Reds, we just won, so you just won something. And then Gregor was going in as head coach at Glasgow. So they're after a dual role. So they're after a defence coach at Glasgow as well as a defence coach for Scotland. So I was lucky enough. I got the opportunity to go over there, and I had 8 wonderful years there, four head coaches in the time there. And probably Scotland 2012 are nowhere near the team that they are now. They were probably at the bottom of their cycle when they gradually got better. But we played New Zealand. I think we got beaten by 50. Next week we played South Africa, and I think we got beaten by 40. And then we went on, a third team was Tonga, which was the team we were supposed to win. And we went up to Aberdeen and we played at the soccer stadium up there, Pataudry, and not a very wide field anyway. And anyway, we got beaten. And the coach at the time, Andy Robinson, got sacked. So it was 3 games in my Scotland career. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, what's going on? But anyway, luckily enough, I had 8 seasons and 2 World Cups with Scotland. And Scott Johnson, the Australian, came in there, and then Vern Cotter, who I learnt a lot off through his time from France, and then Gregor Townsend. So yeah, had a wonderful time up there. Glasgow was a little bit similar to the Reds. Scotland a professional team had never won the competition, and there was a big drive for a Scottish team to win that, and Scottish Rugby Union put a lot of time and emphasis on Glasgow to winning that. And I think we're lucky enough. I think the first year we got knocked out by Leinster in the semi. Next year we made the final, got beaten by them in the final. And the third year we played Munster at Ravenhill and we beat them. So again, it was a great journey. Very similar to the Reds in that there was a lot of emotion attached to it and a lot of supporters. So, and a lot of those guys, the young Finn Russells, who was very young at the time, now they've developed, and a lot of those younger players are now a big part of that kind of Scotland setup, and wonderful experience. And I think in that time with Scotland, like we were talking about the quarterfinal, the 2015 World Cup, what a game it was, like one of the classic, World Cup games, wasn't it? And unfortunately, Scotland was on the losing end, but again, just a wonderful game to be part of. And I had a great time there, and we've got many close friends. My kids feel very Scottish, particularly my daughter, who we took them over when they were 9 and 5. My daughter came back when she was 18. So, yeah, wonderful time and really enjoyable. And we're talking about rugby. You go from Super Rugby, which is a type of way to play the game, and you go to Europe and they play the game differently. And you get guys, again, with Scotland, like we'd have guys in France, say in Claremont, so you go over and spend a week with them and watching them, and they have guys in Saracens, you go there, or Gloucester, and you're just pulling all the different ways to play. And there'd be maybe, and a bit like Gits was talking about, when you were at Toulon, you'd have South African guys, and you'd be able to go, what do you do with them all there? And then they'd open up, whereas when you're against them, Super Rugby, the Australians tend to play the same way, and then the Kiwis aren't going to share what they're doing. You kind of know what they're doing, but then you get the insight. So I think from a coaching perspective, my knowledge I felt went from there to kind of there, and it's just a great way and get an understanding that there's different ways to play the game. And so, yeah, it was a great time. And then I felt my time coming back to the Wallabies, particularly early on when we got the Wallabies, I was able to do a lot of the kind of the kick pressure game and those type of things that I wanted to do at the Wallabies, so which was good.
You talk about the 215, our game.
Yeah.
Do you remember the game plan? What was your
Game
I'm always
plan?
interested in how
that's interesting.
Like oppositions like to say even attack if I was playing in this game, or whether they wanted to run at the halfback who was a bit weak.
Yeah. No.
I tell you what, I do know that you love that. Your players from Rico tell me about you telling them to call me names when we play.
No, no. The one thing I know about Willie is his middle name. So I'm always, whenever I've had teams, I've always said, call him Sanchez, because that's his middle name. He'll know he's talking Tatsy. So there's been a number of years, I think, you've been out in the field against teams.
Playing against
Sanchez, and you're like, how do they know?
Sanchez is running. I stopped losing focus on my job.
Yeah. Now, listen, I think, to be totally honest, there's not a lot of the game plan I remember against Australia. We always knew what a fantastic team Australia was, particularly attack. We always think, Scotland always thought Australia was a very good attacking team, probably really good defensively, but we always thought attack first. So we were always very conscious of trying to nullify the attack. I think you scored 3 or 4, maybe 5 tries that game as well.
Yeah, I think we both got a few tries.
We got a few tries, yeah. But the thing about the game, I suppose, was I think not many people had given Scotland much of a chance, and probably rightly so, because I think we'd done all right in the pool stages, but we hadn't absolutely destroyed anyone. And we'd beaten Japan after they'd beaten South Africa.
Yeah,
and
that was the big game, wasn't it?
Yeah. And again, we were actually at the game. We were there live at that game where Japan beat South Africa, and to be just at that game, I'm just so blessed that I was at a World Cup game like that to see that live.
We were in physios getting strapped. And we pushed training back. We said, they're going to get rolled here. Japan's going to get up. Yeah. It was almost like we won.
We were cheering.
We were jumping around. And
well, we were playing them next. So a couple of the coaches and that, we were there, and we were right in the front row. And I remember the emotion. There were South African guys throwing jerseys off, and there was Japanese people crying. And I remember sitting there again going, how lucky am I? I've been to one of the great test matches of, the Rugby World Cup. But getting back to that Australian game, I think, there was a bit of seesawing and not many people giving Scotland much of a chance. I think just because it was close. And then, as we said, the intercept at the end, I think there was 6 minutes to go.
Game slipper dummy.
Yeah.
If he threw it the first time, we're away.
Fine, yeah. Yeah, so, as you said, slips double dummied and then gave it to the Mark Bennett.
Yeah.
And I'd coached slips as a kid at TSS and then the Reds and what have you. So part of it, I was very excited because I thought 5 minutes and we're through here. And then part of me was feeling for slips because I was thinking, oh my goodness, if Australia loses. But unfortunately, it wasn't to be that game. And but what a test match to be involved in,
How was that in the change rooms after that penalty? Like, it's obviously...
Yeah, listen, I think where everyone was gutted and, you're trying to work out whether it was a penalty or it wasn't. And in the end, it's gone. That moment's gone. And whether it's right or wrong, it's past. I think, to be honest, maybe if you'd said to the boys beforehand whether it would have been that close, we knew we were up against a very good Australian team. You guys have been playing really well. So to be that close and, whether we would have been happy with that, I don't know, because we wanted to beat you guys. But, it was one of those moments in past, been disappointed, but you just had to move on, and no good kind of, reflecting upon it. That was just the way it was. I think with the referee running off at the end, that was always the thing. He just kind of bolted off. I think Greg was trying to talk to him. He wasn't interested. He was just wanting to get out.
I heard Eddie Jones speak recently. He was saying that a lot of the cultural aspects of countries tend to, in a way, determine how those teams play. England, obviously, he used England as an example. They like to be very organised in what they do. South Africa, big, physical, abrasive people.
Yeah.
I think he said they were winning 36-0 in the World Cup in 2007. And the second half, they said, let's just kick the ball and let's practice our defence. And then he said Australia, probably in that situation, would foot on the throat, look for the kill. With Scotland, how, if at all, did the cultural aspect of the way of life that influenced how they played the game, like their psyche?
Yeah, I think they've certainly shifted and brought experience and more confident in their ability. I think they sit very well as underdogs. I think they probably psychologically don't sit as well when they're supposed to be the leaders or better. Hence probably even that Rugby World Cup game in 2015, we were really underdogs to Australia, I think, statistically and by the bookies, and to get that close with 5 minutes to go to winning it was unbelievable. I think we played Australia 6 times in my time with Scotland. The first 3 or 4, I think we lost, and that I think the 4th game was the Rugby World Cup, but then we managed to win in Sydney for the first time.
Yeah, that was a real wet game, wasn't it?
That was before. That was 2011. That was before.
No, it was 2012.
2012 was it?
Yeah,
6-3 or something.
in Newcastle.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Did you play?
Yeah, I did, yeah.
Yeah, right.
Right, so you've lost to Scotland how many times?
I can't remember, but I also played in the game where you missed that easy kick from in front.
Yeah, so that's another one that you lost.
Yeah.
You lost that one, yeah.
You must have won a few too.
I've won a few, yeah. I've lost a few. I think I might be 50-50, but you towed us up in 2017.
Yeah. It's funny, the Newcastle one that you're talking about, the Scottish boys talk about, I wasn't part of it, but they said at the start of the game when the anthems were going, it was raining cold, and all the Scots boys were just sitting there. They're used to the cold, and they looked over, and he said all the Aussie boys were like,
it was raining sideways. It was raining sideways.
And they thought,
This guy here is cold right now. We've got the heater on.
well, a few of you got hypothermia, didn't they?
Paddy McCabe had to be in like a tin foil or something like after the game.
He's very precious though. Like,
Is he?
no, well, he seems that way, I suppose.
I think
If he's shaking,
he's
a good fella though.
He's a good bloke. But that was a tough game, that one.
Yeah, and they managed to win that game. And then there was probably another 3 or 4 years, because I'd then come in the next year. I think we played Australia for maybe 3 times and we lost, and then we won the one in Sydney, and then the one you suggested, we won the one at Murrayfield. Yep. We won by 50 in the end, win the red card at half time. Yeah.
But it's interesting that underdog mentality you speak about, because I remember every single time I played against Scotland, like they would fight for everything. It always felt like it was a scrappy test, and they made it that way on purpose.
Yeah, no, they're scrappers and they get stuck in. And as I've said, I think what they've done really well, even in the last 2 or 3 years, is that experience is starting to come through. Like they probably went from back in 2012, where it was always them and Italy scrapping it out for the wooden spoon. I think it was 2018 we beat England for the first time in a decade, and you'd see what they've done in the last 5 years. I think they've You know,
Back
we
to back,
won.
Calcutta, isn't it?
Yeah, so that was, again, talking about unbelievable games. So 2018, beating England for the first time in a decade, that was unbelievable atmosphere. We went out that night. We went back as a coaching group and a team, and we drank a lot. And then Gregor at about 2 a.m. said, why don't we go to a nightclub or something? And then we came to this nightclub. No joke, and people were having us up on their shoulders, and we got him at 5, so that was good. And then the next year, the return at Twickenham, so we went there, and at half time we were down by, I think it was maybe 28 points. And I'm sitting there going, oh my goodness, as a defence coach, you just go,
I'm gone.
We managed to, our hooker managed to charge down. We scored just for half time, and we came into the change rooms, and basically Gregor, the head coach, said, listen, the game's over. Let's have some respect here. We've got to score first. So anyway, we went out and we scored, and then we just scored again. I think we scored 5 tries. And then with 2 or 3 minutes to go, we were ahead. And anyway, unfortunately, a little bit like the game against you guys in the quarterfinal at the time, we managed, unfortunately, to stuff something up, give a penalty away, and they scored, which drawed the game. But again, a test match to be involved in. And when I say the great thing, it wasn't great to draw, but at least what happened was we get to keep the Calcutta Cup. So it kind of felt like a win. And that was the time I was telling you, I think Finn Russell went out that night and went in London, and he spent £30,000 on champagne and drink for all the boys. So he certainly enjoyed himself that night to retain it. And then, as we said about Scotland, then I think in the next 4 or 5 games, I think they've won 4 out of the 5 of them, I think. So again, they're shifting mentality. They're starting to win. And again, I mean, Six Nations, as you guys will know, is such a massive competition. And you know, and so many of those teams, the England, the Irelands, the Frances, the Welsh, it's such a big competition.
Even the Italians are playing much better.
Really well. Mate, they're really good. And it's great. And to win that, you've got to be a good team, don't you?
Yeah.
And, I mean, you can be a really good team and finish 3rd in that comp. I mean, Wales seem to be, again, their cycle's here now at the moment, doesn't it? Seeing they might be another year or 2, but France, Italy, they're all going up. So, but yeah, I had a wonderful time with Scotland in those 8 years.
Absolutely. Let's talk a little bit about your relationship with Gregor, because you played with him, as you said.
Yeah.
You coached with him. What was he like as a player? What was he like off the field as a player?
I had a great time with Gregor. Playing with Gregor, I was laughed because I was at 7, so I said I used to do a lot of his tackling for him. But he was actually not a bad defender. But he was always very astute reader of the game. I think he was always going to be a coach. He's a very extremely hard worker and just looks at the game really deeply, I suppose. So Gregor wanted to play the fastest attacking rugby in the world back in the 2019 World Cup. And I think after that experience, certainly against Ireland, where we attacked quite a lot, but then they made a mistake, balls got kicked through. I went to Australia. I think Gregor shifted a little bit, played a little bit more pragmatically, I think. And the defence certainly got stronger and kicked a little bit more and set piece. But again, they're starting to attack really well, so they've got that good balance now. But good guy, good coach. And
as a player, he might have been a certain way.
Yeah.
From a coaching point of view, were they similar, or did he shift?
He was very flamboyant, a little bit like Finn is. But as a coach, he's very, very detailed. He's very well planned.
Calculated.
Yeah, so sometimes that balance between letting a player just play and that. But I think, again, as he's coached, he's worked out which players to kind of let roam, and I think him and from all accounts, him and Finn have worked out where they both sit and how each one to operate both on and off the field from what I've been told. So, and that's good for Scotland. So,
do you think also it's like to what you're saying there? Is it because once you move into a coach's role, you've got to look at the game in totality? Whereas, say, if you're a playmaker, you're coming up with a player that you see can potentially work, but then when you move into a coaching space, you look at it from a defensive perspective as well.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. I had a brief stint at Toulon. So Morad, the owner of Toulon, sacked Mike Ford. I think Mike Ford got moved on, and he was in charge of the backs. And we put Cockerell was the assistant coach. He came up to head coach. I had a meeting with Morad. He said, "Okay, you're now the backs coach for the last 5-6 weeks." I was like, "Well, I'm still playing." well, I said, I can't do this. He said, well, this is how it's going to work.
Did you get a pay rise?
No. But
It's unlike you to accept it. That's like volunteering. You have problems with volunteering for people.
listen, Will, we're going to have some issues. The worst part about it was initially the first 2 weeks I was injured, is you draw up a game plan, or you help do the game plan, you give it to the players, train well all week, then you sit back and you've got no control.
Yeah.
As a coach, I hated that, and I knew straight away that coaching wouldn't be for me, because you can't do anything, and if they don't do what you're supposed to do, like what can you do?
Yeah, that is the hardest part. That's up to them now, and off you go. So.
And from relationship point of view, what's your approach? How do you?
Yeah, my approach is always I try and get to know the person as well as I can. I try and help develop them as much as I can from a rugby perspective, but I try and get to know them as a person, so that the times I need to be tough on them, and they know that I'm coming from a good spot, and they know I've got their best interest for them. If I don't get to know them and I don't try and build that relationship to them, and then the times where I've got to be tough on them, then they kind of, I feel personally, they probably go, well, I don't have any relationship with this guy. This guy's giving me a hard time, then I'm not going to play for him, or I'm not going to listen to him.
I reckon that's definitely a point of difference for you as a coach. Like, you always feel like you've got that relationship to the point where if you're having a go at us, it comes from the right place. But also, once you build that relationship, naturally the player then understands the difference between coach and person.
Yeah.
So when we're on the coaching field, you're very much a coach, but as soon as the session finishes, how's your family? Like, what are you up to this week? What are you doing after the game? That type of thing. The other thing I wanted to ask you was, a lot of people talk about, the volatility around contracting for players and how that can be stressful. You can be put in place for 1 year, 2 year, 3 years. You were fortunate that you were in Scotland for 8 years, but coaching is incredibly cutthroat. Incredibly cutthroat. You can be signed somewhere for 4 years, and then the head coach of that organisation gets moved on, and you get moved on as well.
Way worse than players, I reckon.
Yeah, and I mean, so how do you deal with the stresses of that and the challenges that present themselves there?
Yeah, listen, I think you've got to understand, if you go down that route, you've got to understand that, there's going to be some tough times, no matter how good a coach you are, I think. And you look at all the great coaches, even the best coaches, they've probably been sacked or moved on, or things have changed, and you just got to try and adapt as best you can, which I've tried to do.
So let's jump ahead now to Scotland. You then made the return to Australia.
Yeah. So I came back to Australia. Got back to Australia within 3 months of getting back to Australia. COVID hit. So Dave Rennie came on board as a Wallabies coach. I've got a good relationship with Dave. I'd had a number of years with Scotland. I'd always had ambitions to coach the Wallabies and be part of the Wallabies. And Dave came on board and he approached me to be part of that coaching group, which I accepted and was great. And so again, my daughter was in her last year of school, so my wife and daughter stayed in Scotland. I came back with my son. My son went into boarding school. I started with the Wallabies, and then I think it was around March time, the world changed or closed up. So my wife and daughter had to kind of navigate through being over in Scotland while I was back here. And we started off, we played New Zealand was our first game in Wellington, where we had that draw. Could have probably gained, should have or could have probably beaten them in that game. And we did a lot of box kicking, and I tried to take a lot of lessons out of the lines, and maybe Ireland and England beating New Zealand with dual contacts and double hits and a lot of contestable kicks. And we did that a lot in that first game. And like I said, we got a draw, came up short, didn't get the win, but you could see a lot of the good things coming out in that style against New Zealand. Had a great, I think it was 24 tests I had with the Wallabies, and very gracious to have that time with the Wallabies and get that opportunity to coach a team, which again, supported as a child. And we had our ups and downs in that period. I think winning 5 games in a row, we beat South Africa twice, the world champions at the time, beat Argentina twice, and Japan was great. And then we had a little bit of a down period where we went over Europe, and then we had our ups and downs the following years. So, but gracious to have that time with them and learn a lot. And international rugby is, the top level is a great environment to be in, but it's very high pressured. I'd been doing that for a decade, and it was a good time to step back and my daughter had also had a couple of issues in around her health, so it was a good time to step away and, you know, concentrate on the family. And also I thought down the track I'll do something different, and I'd always fancied to come to Japan, so got opportunity to come over here, so it's been good.
What do you think about Eddie's appointment?
Listen, mate, his record speaks for itself, I think, doesn't it, in terms of what he's done with teams and World Cups and that. But, I mean, you guys have both been coached by him. You'll know more about him. I've never coached with him. I've met him on a number of occasions, and he's always been very good to me in terms of giving time and talking, and he seems a very intelligent guy. So I'm sure they'll be well prepared, and he has a good understanding of what wins World Cups.
Moving forward, like with this particular Wallaby group, you've got intimate knowledge of the players, having worked with them for an extended period of time. What are the areas do you think that they need to work on in order to be able to, you know, I think firstly compete at the World Cup, but also take Rugby Australia into the next generation of success?
Yeah, it's a good question, Willie. I think
It's a big question.
Yeah, it's a big question. I think there's lots of things probably at various levels that we've got to keep working. We've got to work at the grassroots level. We've got to work at the Wallaby level in terms of what that looks like with players going overseas, and even the super teams. How many super teams are capable of doing well and things like that. I think European rugby and the way they play their club rugby over there is more akin to how Test match rugby is played, I believe. And I think Dave was getting there by the end of his tenure at the Wallabies. Certainly, rightly or wrongly, you've got to know how to kick the ball, when and where, and how many times. And statistically, Test match rugby is often won with how often you kick the ball, whether people like that or not. I think statistically, it's like 78% if you generally kick it more than the opposition, you're going to win those games. So I think Australian rugby needs to understand when to attack and how to attack, but also when to apply pressure through the kicking game and the types of kicks, whether they're contestable along. And I mean, I think Bernard is a good understanding of that. I certainly know Quade is good at that, knowing and coaching him. So I think that's a big part, and I think they were getting there. And you look at that England series, I think the first game when we won, we outkicked England and conceded less turnovers. I think game 2 and 3 where we lost, statistically off the top of my head, they certainly outkicked us in both games. I can't remember the numbers, but I think it was 10 times in the second test and maybe 13 to 15 times in the third test. So again, you got to get that balance between running and kicking. And I think Test match rugby is different to provincial rugby. I think my experience, my understanding or view is I think you can attack a little bit more in provincial rugby. I think Test match rugby is about, set piece, defence, kicking game, and nearly, rightly or wrongly, attack nearly comes at the end
off the back of successful kicks.
Yeah. Although, like when you look at Ireland at the moment, in France, when they do light up, they both have a good attacking game. So it's not to say that you can't attack or you don't, but I just think those areas of the game for me, after being involved over a number of Test matches, is the areas that will win your game more than probably your attack.
Absolutely.
It's interesting because, when we won the competition, we had a conversation about this earlier where with the Reds, obviously there's a lot of spoken about how we used to attack and how we played, but we kicked the ball the most.
Yep.
And I think
they were attacking kicks though.
Yeah,
it's
and
not just that
exactly right.
Aimless kicking where
Exactly
you kick
right.
it along. You're still attacking, but you're not throwing the passes. So you're using your kicking game to attack and put pressure on, and then off the back of that, you guys would light up.
Yeah. And also attack kicking is also kicking potential on the front foot. So we say, like you put a contestable kick up, you get the ball back, but then you've manipulated the backfield and you find space again. They potentially kick it out. You get a line out to somewhere around their 22.
Yes.
And that's the idea of squeezing teams. So I was fortunate in the system that we were part of that I was able to learn that. So sort of going a little bit further with that, do you think it's coaching or do you think it's just and coaching at a grassroots level or like a super level or a test level, or is it just rugby IQ for the individual players?
I think personally it's all the above that you suggest. I think we can still do it better at Super Rugby. And that's developing the younger guys coming through and helping them. And it's certainly just the game plans. I think certainly Super Rugby, historically, the way it's been played, and I talking to you before, you were saying is different way. It's a bit more of a probably running type game or score more points than the opposition rather than...
It's more like it feels like in Australia, you've got to put a spectacle on.
Yeah.
Because we're competing with rugby league, soccer, AFL, these sports which are dominating. rugby's got to be attractive and it's got to be entertaining.
Yep.
Sometimes it's not the smartest option to take to run all the time, or so it feels like that's what we're competing with. Whereas in Europe, especially from my experience playing club football, if we won, it didn't matter if it was 3-0.
That's right. Yeah,
if we scrum well, like they were there to appreciate the game and just more the victory, the contest.
Yes.
So that was what I was meaning with the Super Rugby there, where they attack a lot more.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that. I think, you live in Europe and, apart from football, which is a massive sport, rugby's generally the second biggest sport, and you're going to get those guys loving the mauls and the scrums and the kicking the penalties, whether, it's a lot of attacking rugby or not. I think Australian teams in the past have maybe been guilty of attack, slow down, kick, or attack, turn over, you back down the other end, rather than, you look at a lot of these European teams, attack, 3 or 4 phases of ball, put in the corner, chase, kick it out, blast, get the ball back. So
it's almost part of their game plan. Like they've got 3 phases, so we're going to go here, then we're going to kick.
Yeah.
Everyone's on the same page, like you said. Yeah. Kicking on the front foot. So then it's actually a weapon that you can use. I just think Australia's biggest issue at the moment, and it has been for a long time, is you talk about the underdog tag. As underdogs, we perform super well. Like against New Zealand, if Bernard didn't take so long and he knew the rules and kicked the ball out, we beat New Zealand. But the next week, everyone's expecting a similar performance. So everyone's talking positively about the Wallabies. We go to New Zealand and we get flogged. So it's like those inconsistencies.
true.
To be good at a World Cup, you've got to be consistent. You've got to win potentially 4 games at least your last 4 in a row if you want to win a World Cup. So that's more the challenge that I think the Wallabies are facing.
Yeah. No, I agree.
How have you found that? You said you always wanted to come over here, but
No, I found it really good. Great experience, both on and off the field. Even learning how to coach the Japanese boys, I've got to be very, very specific with how I coach or giving them instructions, because I think, again, it's probably a strength and a weakness, but if you tell them to do something, they'll do it exactly like that. And so I'm learning how to coach and what to do. And so I've really enjoyed it. I'm here without my family, so that's been tough. But I've just, as all rugby jobs are, you kind of get there at 7 in the morning, you get home at 7 at night. I can go home a bit during the year. My family just came over recently. Went skiing and did all the fun stuff. And Rico Black Rams are certainly a team which have been probably in the bottom half of the draw for a number of years. I believe we probably don't have the biggest budget, but I think we're heading in the right direction. I think we're building, getting better and better and better. But I'm really enjoying it and enjoying the experience. And I'm certainly here for at least another more year I've signed on for. So, and after that, we'll see if things are going well or stay, or you never know. You could be back in Europe, you could be back in Australia, as we know with this rugby journey. Down the track, I'd like to be a head coach at some stage. So that's something which is driving me and keeping me going as well. So I'll hopefully get that opportunity at some stage.
with players and coaches, you tend to do a bit of travel, so I guess you don't have that culture shock necessarily quite as much. But have you had any sort of strange situations over here or any shocks?
No, just probably the hard thing, not being able to communicate. I was laughing the other day. I had to go get my tax number, and I came back and I probably sat for about 15 minutes in front of this lady, and I probably understood about 2% of what she was saying, and there was lots of laughing and talking and pointing and all that. So I need to get stuck into my lessons a little bit more. But it's certainly a wonderful place and a different place. So I'm enjoying the different cultural aspects of Japan, and I'm certainly going to enjoy a few more over the next couple of years. And but that's a great thing. I'd love to get back to Europe at some stage. I enjoyed European rugby and during my time in Scotland. I got a lot of good friends, both personally and professionally over there. So, I wouldn't imagine at some stage I'll probably find myself back over there as well. So,
how have you found? Do you had anything?
There's obviously things that are a little bit different, like funny little things. Like for example, when you're standing at the light to cross, and it could be at like 1 a.m, and there's no cars on the road, people will still stand waiting for the light to go green.
Yeah.
I will just walk, and I feel like I should go to jail because of the way people are looking at me. So just little things like that, which are a little bit different. But I think all in all, the thing I enjoy about being here is like people are so kind and welcoming, and from a rugby perspective, they work so hard. Like the thing that I probably struggle with that is they struggle to adapt in game.
Yeah.
Like it's almost like PowerPoint rugby where this is what we're supposed to do at this part of the field, but then if something happens, they don't have the ability to adapt based on playing what's in front. But I think all in all, I've loved my time here.
And I mean, what's it like working? Because you do have part-time professionals
Yeah.
set up as well.
Yeah. So yeah, your schedule. You just got to work around your schedule in terms of like they'll do weights and certain training different times to when the full-time guys do. So same with
Same.
But it's certainly something which I've found a little bit different too. Like some of these guys, some of the rugby guys, once they finish rugby, they'll be at Rico. That's them for the rest of their life, you know. And you know, it's amazing just the setups in these companies and how they work. So yeah, it's an interesting concept.
They've got some flash cars too.
Yeah.
I think because they know that they've got income for the rest of their life, so they don't need to save or wait for some period. So they'll turn up in the flashiest cars, but on the smallest income.
No, I think that's just at Suntory, mate. We have bikes at Kintetsu.
Still enjoy having a drink with the boys afterwards?
Yeah, we haven't had a chance to have a huge drink because I think one of the rules, like away wins, is you get on the bullet train, and I think through COVID you weren't allowed to drink or something. So, but yeah, we got back and had a few drinks after, and not the crazy times that we probably had at the Reds, but again, I'm a bit older now, a bit older and wiser. But the Japanese also tend to drink a lot quickly and then finish quickly.
Yeah.
Yes,
Don't
they
they?
go.
I think because
not the long haul.
it's almost like you've got a 2-hour window. You'll pay to go to like a karaoke bar.
Yes.
And all you can drink and whatever, and they'll just get super flooded within 2 hours.
Yes.
Then get on the train
Go home.
and get
Agree.
home.
Yeah. They're power drinkers.
Whereas as the foreigners, we're just starting to build at the end of the 2 hours.
Yeah.
It's smarter what they do.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Just want to jump back to your Scotland time
Yep.
briefly. So Glasgow and Scotland at the same time.
Yep.
Did you sort of cop any, banter from sort of the Edinburgh guys when you were sort of working with both?
Yeah, a little bit. It was a strength for me because Glasgow probably would have had at least a third of the Scotland team and maybe half at some stage. So we were just doing the defensive strategies that we'd do when they came into Scotland. I'd actually played for Edinburgh as well, so I had that kind of connection. But there was always a little bit of banter. And first couple of years, the 1872 Cup, which is the oldest club competition in the world, we managed to win that for the first 3 or 4 years, so they didn't have much on me. I think my last year we might have lost it, so they had a little bit more to give back to me. But I had a wonderful time in Glasgow. Glasgow's a completely different city to Edinburgh as well. Glasgow is very working class, and then Edinburgh is quite posh, and it's a beautiful city. And I'd played and lived in Edinburgh, but then my kids are growing up in Glasgow, and so I got the benefit of being in both parts of Scotland, whether it was playing or coaching.
We've got a wee voice message that we received from Ryan Wilson, friend of the show.
Ryan was certainly a colourful character at Glasgow. Certainly, you guys, or a lot of you will remember probably 2 games, particularly the England game, as well as he did the same with the Welsh, where before the game he kind of ended up engineering a fight or a bit of a ruckus. Certainly against England, that was when we won the Calcutta Cup. I think it got under their feathers, and he did the same with the Welsh when we beat them for the first time for a long time. He's got a ruffling feathers and getting under skins. And
Matt bloody Taylor. Well, what can I say? One thing I know about Matt, Tatsy boy, is he always had the boys back no matter what. It was like one of the boys. You could trust him. That's what I loved about him the most. Legend of the bloke, and absolutely loves the sauce. Loves a couple jars.
No, he's a lovely guy, and he was a big part of both Glasgow and even Scotland's success. Just he was always driving standards, and he was one of these guys that could be tough on guys, and people would respect him, and he'd have a good time off the pitch as well, which he's talking about there. So I think he liked me because often I'd see him doing silly things, but I wouldn't tell the head coach, and probably a bit like the Reds. I was the vault, so I was probably in the boys' good books. So.
Awesome. And one other guy you coached, you talked about a little bit, but you would have been with Finn Russell sort of during the early years. What was he like as a young player?
Yeah, Finn was great. He's not a big guy, but he can actually defend really well, which I loved. He's very competitive. He was a stonemason by trade, so he's quite. Even though he's wiry, he's quite strong. just could see things. He's probably a bit like these two guys, just very creative in his play. And certainly I remember the game that he played against Australia in Sydney. He had a really good game. When he turns it on, he can turn it on. I think in his early career, both with Glasgow and Scotland, he could be a little bit like that. But I think as he's got older, he's got more consistent in terms of his performance. And he likes a beer as well. He likes a good time. He doesn't take things too seriously. What I like about Finn too is he'll give it his all, and then when the game's over, win, lose or draw, he's just like, oh, well, that's over. He can leave things pretty easy, which I found quite refreshing because some young guys can actually dwell on it already.
That's a talent, that.
Yeah, he's very good at that.
Yeah.
Yeah. But no, he was a great guy. I'm still in contact with him and his partner, Emma, who they've just had a young child. So he's in a good spot.
Awesome. And last question from me. Talked about that World Cup 2015. 2015 World Cup. Being in the stands and watching that Japanese South Africa game.
Oh yeah.
Did that change how you guys had to prepare, or did that change because you would have been counting on effectively going through as first or second in that pool?
Yeah.
South Africa losing sort of changed things a little bit for you guys.
We were just focused on winning every game we played. But what we did realise, or we believe, because we got Japan on the 4-day tournament, but what we knew about that game, or what we felt, was that it was such an emotional high for Japan. And reading a lot into it, Eddie had been, and that I think that's one of the strengths of Eddie, is he picks a game and he just conditioned them and trained them that they were going to win this game, and it came out. And Eddie was quite even smart in the lead up to our game against Scotland. He was saying, right, if Japan's ahead of Scotland in the first 20 minutes, we're going to win. I think it was his way of getting in the minds of his players just to give them that energy. But we kind of felt a little bit like the Reds v Crusaders when we played with that final. We just knew that if we were close with them, we'd get over them in the end because of the mental and emotional fatigue. And that certainly happened in 2015. Different story in 2019 when it was here. And it was either us or them to go through the quarters. And again, you talk about great games to be involved in.
That was some game.
Disappointing to lose. But again, at the end of it, when you lose, there's nothing you can do. Just to say, I've been part of another World Cup game, which will go down in history because it was a brilliant game. They played, I thought they had an awesome World Cup. They came up against South Africa in the next game. But atmosphere at that stadium was electric that night when they were playing for that first time to get through to a quarters, and they certainly deserve that win that night.
How good are the Japanese crowds?
Yeah, they're great. They're different in terms of how they're quite quiet, but then they'll clap at certain times. And my family came over, and I think they were screaming and shouting, and the Japanese are going, who are these lunatics from Australia when they came over? But the crowds are great, and I'm really enjoying being part of the Japanese League One, and then the talent of players here is incredible, isn't it? The better teams have probably got more better Japanese players.
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
So I think how the depth of your Japanese playing group has a certain influence on how well you go in the Japanese as well. And that's something which our Japanese guys at Rico are getting better and better. And we feel we've definitely got a couple of guys which will be internationals in the near future. It's getting them to a certain standard.
I think also the development of Japanese rugby has increased massively because of the talent that's now coming over here. Like, you've got guys even in their peak, not even at the end of their career, but in their peak, coming over, and these Japanese players get the experience to see how they prepare, stretching, cool down, recovery, how they lift weights, the intensity they do training. They're constantly learning, and off the back of that, they're just going to develop and get better.
Well, you look after the next World Cup, the quality of people that looks like they've signed up or coming over. I think after the next World Cup, the competition's even going to be better and bigger, isn't it?
You want to get away from here.
Yeah.
Well, you've got Aaron Smith, Bowden Barrett, Richie Mwanga, Artie Savea.
Yeah.
And all players, essentially, you'd say, like Aaron Smith is a little bit older, but he's still competing at the highest level. But all players who are still playing exceptional elite football are coming over.
Tell me, a question for you guys that I'm interested in is, so if you're a player in Australia or New Zealand or South Africa, and you got a chance to go to France or you got to go to Japan, is money similar or is it different? Or would you go, okay, I'm going to get, maybe come to Japan, it's going to be less physical? Do you weigh those type of things up as players?
Well, I personally really wanted to go to France.
Yep.
So when I went over there, I'd signed an 18-month deal thinking that was going to be it. And ended up staying there for 5 and a bit years. At that stage, I wanted to come back to Japan, still wanted to compete, but it was that attractive part of you play 6 months and then you get 6 months at home.
Yeah.
The kids get into school, you get back into a bit of normality,
Yeah.
closer to home. So that's
Yeah, right.
the appeal
Yeah.
for me. And the league wasn't as tough as it's starting to become when I first came. So it was easier on the body. Just fitness-wise was a big adjustment for me.
Yeah.
Like I had to really pick up on my fitness a bit more.
Because it's speed of the game.
Yeah.
Speed of the game here. Yeah, so I was one of the fitter players at Toulon, but then they sent me a basic program and it nearly killed me
Yeah.
when I was starting to run.
Yeah.
We would have games here in Suntory pre-season where you're not allowed to kick.
I've heard that. Yeah.
Can't kick. So you're in your 22, you got a full line in front of you, and as a ball player, you know the right thing is to kick, but you can't. We're just...
You wanted to practice your skills or something?
No, it's just like working under fatigue. Keep running. Just keep running. It was just like out of your comfort zone. Yeah. It was something that Eddie brought in.
Man, he brought that in at the Reds in 2007. We lost to the Bulls 92-3.
Yeah, well, that was an actual game, but this was like pre-season.
I know.
Yeah.
I know.
And Georgie Smith at the time was here, and he put a little kick in, and you can hear Eddie, George! And he just pulled him off, got him off.
Really?
Yeah. But then off the back of that, Keske, who was the assistant coach, learnt off Eddie. Eddie then moved on. Keske is now the coach, but they still adapt the same techniques. And we had one of those games where you're just constantly running,
I mean,
which was an adjustment.
For me personally, like around the time where I went to France, that I wanted to experience playing rugby in the Northern Hemisphere, in Europe. And so that was certainly the appeal. And then after that, I came back to Australia, and I was at the Rebels for a couple of years. And I had the opportunity to stay there for another 2. I had another 2-year deal on the table. But similar to what Matt was saying there is the appeal of coming to Japan. You know, you play for, 7 months and then you have 5 months off. The ability to then spend more time with your family back home. That was the big thing for me. Like the money was similar in all regards. So it was more a case of choosing the lifestyle that I wanted to live at that point in my career.
Sure.
Awesome, guys. Unfortunately, that's really all we've got time for today. But Manny, thanks so much for coming along.
Thanks very much for having me, guys. It's been great.
Thank
Great
mate.
having
That
you,
was awesome.
and Gits, and well, as always, great to have you, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
That's it.
Thanks very much.
Cheers.